All right, shall we get started again?
Okay.
Yes, let's. So Winnie has stepped out to check on her kids, and she'll be back, but we can go ahead and pick up with the questions here in the meantime. Let's see.
Thank you.
So there are, let's see, in the chat, let's see, Marion and Emma and Victoria, and then let's see, Sheila has her hand up, and I see she's just put in to the chat here. So that's the order we'll go in so far. Marion, Emma, Victoria, Sheila. And then I will try my best to put you in order that I see your hand icon get raised, but we'll get to everyone. I apologize if I, put someone ahead of you, and I want to enlist everyone's help also to help me making sure we see everyone who's got their question. All right, so let me get back to where the question started. Here we are, from Marion to Brenda. How do you handle interpreting and translation at the same time? Due dates and interpreting gigs probably suddenly coincide. Let's see, does your company have staff, or do you use outsourcing, etc.?
I carry my laptop with me everywhere I go. And if I do have a translation that's due, basically in whatever hours I'm not interpreting, I'm translating. I don't get a lot of sleep. Well, until coronavirus hit. All of a sudden I didn't have any more work at all. But before that, I was not getting a heck of a lot of sleep. But yeah, I always have my computer with me, and somehow it always manages to work out. Was there another part of the question?
So yeah, Marion, jump in if you wanted to clarify or ask another point of that, or.
There's something wrong with. Can you hear me? I think there's something wrong. Oh, you can. Oh, no, that covers it. I've just had to instead pass on interpreting requests to others because it just never worked. In other words, I guess going elsewhere and then doing the interpreting and then trying to do the translation was hard on me. But I think I'm much older than you. But you have 4 kids, so that pretty amazes me that you can do all that. Anyway, but yeah, that was it.
I think a lot of people, especially in the beginning, it was really hard to actually get work because people are like, oh, you have kids, and then all of a sudden, we can't ask you to do any work. And I just say, no, my kids they're not a factor. Because I'm very lucky, and I think maybe someone else asked about this as well. My husband, because he works for his first father, who knows exactly how much he gets paid and how little he gets paid, basically. My father-in-law is very aware that without my income, we wouldn't be able to support our family. So he is very generous with my husband's time. And so I can do a lot of business trips where I, am away from the house. I've done, a month at a time away from home before, because my husband is able to go into work later, leave earlier, drive the kids to and from, well, now they're all in school, but before when they were in kindy, and make bentos and dinner and take care of all that. But that was the agreement before we got married, was that I would be the breadwinner. And he would help not help, but he would do the majority of the child minding, which can't say that he does, but he definitely does his fair share when I'm not around.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, so our next question, as you were just mentioning, Brenda, was there's more people asking about how you manage all this. So Emma is asking about how you manage, how you juggle work and childcare, and if it's all right, I'm going to skip over a little bit of that because you kind of just answered it, but then at the end. So she says she's wondering if there's any kind of interpreting work that's more accommodating to mothers of small children, which is probably wishful thinking, she says.
Yeah, I think I'm just very lucky in that I have my husband to take over those duties. But when my twins were very small, I used a babysitting service offered by the city. And I think that there are these services in cities all over Japan that people just don't know about. And if you contact your local health care office, they can kind of guide you where you might find these services. I think they're usually, organizations of older women who are done with their own child raising, and who almost will, you know, babysit for you on a volunteer kind of service, or the silver service even, and use those services if your daycare won't look after your kids after a certain period of time. So I definitely used those services when my kids were younger, and before they were in daycare full time.
Emma, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think more or less. Thanks. I mean, I've tried to look for everything that is around here, but there's even the silver service. It's very, very limited because there's so much in the country, and I guess it's interpreting is really, really difficult. Even translation, I find it hard to get out there and do like the networking, like you're saying, knowing people. It's just hard because I'm physically in Accra and I have to be back at 4 o'clock to pick up my son. But yeah, I'm figuring it out as much as I can. Thanks. That's good. Thanks.
All right, thanks. All right, so Brenda, I'm keeping you in the spotlight here because the next one is from Victoria to you. Where did you study conference interpreting?
At Interschool. So I was in Osaka. Interschool has schools in Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, Fukuoka, I think Toyama as well. I'm not, maybe it's Fukuoka, I can't remember. They have another school or two around Japan. At the time I was, so this is about 12 years ago when I was attending 2007 through 2008, physical, like you had to physically go to the school. So I was living in Osaka, so I could do that. When I moved to Nagano, I wanted to kind of continue with a higher level, but I could only do that by commuting to Tokyo, and I would have to retake the tests and all this stuff. So I had a baby, and I never got around to doing it, but I studied at Interschool, my conference interpreting course.
Okay, thanks for that. I think maybe Lisa's going to mention it, but Jennifer O'Donnell also has a question about that for you, right? Is that right,
Yeah,
Lisa?
it is. Yes. So so Sheila, let me apologize that I will skip you for just a moment and go down to Jennifer since we're on the topic right now. So let's see. Jennifer says, you mentioned you completed a conference interpreting course. May I ask what the course goal was, and was it the weekend or full time during the week? And did you find it useful? So anything else you want to add, or Jennifer, if you want to jump in and tag on to that?
Yes, I know of Interschool. I took their tests, but got too busy to take it at the weekends. So really, I wanted to know, main question is, did you find it particularly useful?
Yes, actually, it was great, because I was the only non-Japanese person in the class. I think I was the actual first non-Japanese person they ever allowed into the course. I think they didn't believe that I could actually speak Japanese at the level of an interpreter, and they let me into the lowest level of conference interpreting to start out with, and after a week in the course, the instructor said she needs to go up to the next level, which was very heartening, but and very good for my confidence as well. But it was fantastic to hear all of my classmates using business Japanese and conference Japanese, and I learned so much just from my other classmates. The teachers, of course, the instructors were professional conference interpreters as well, and I learned a lot from them. But and I think they learned a lot from me as well, because the expressions that I would use were much more natural English, and so a lot of times the instructor would highlight, what I had used in my interpretation, but it was so helpful for me to be hearing this conference Japanese around me and how the Japanese people interpreted the English. So yeah, I definitely recommend it if that's something you're interested in doing.
May I ask what level you got up to, Brenda? Because you just mentioned there were different levels. So.
Yes, so I finished the course. There's the conference interpreting course. I think there are 4 levels. So I finished the 4th level, and then there's the level after that that's not advertised. You have to, I think, finish their 4 courses before you can go into the level after that. And I finished the 4 levels, and just as I was going to the next level is when I was 8 months pregnant and ready to move to Nagano. So I never finished that level.
Oh, amazing. But you did the 4 levels. That's fantastic.
It was not, the last 6 months when I was pregnant were not easy at all. But yeah.
I can imagine. Let's see. Now, the reason that I asked was because when I did a Master of Arts in Japanese Interpreting and Translation, then to be honest, I didn't ever think I'd be an interpreter. I didn't want to be an interpreter, but I had to do that interpreting part of it. And there was a really full-on test at the end. So, you know, you either got the conference interpreter accreditation or you didn't. So, yeah. So it's really full-on being an interpreter.
It is. I try to avoid conferences, actually. But it's too much pressure.
Yeah, I can understand that. Thanks for sharing your information. Thank
That's
you.
my pleasure.
All right, if we're ready to leave the interpreting question, let's go on to Sheila. And Sheila, you've got quite a long question here. So is it all right if I just let you ask it yourself?
Yes. Okay. Some of you know that about 2 years ago, I was hired by the HR firm of an electric company here in Kyushu, and I was hired only 2 days a week. I'm currently 3 days a week. It was my goal and my wish to be hired full time. Listening to Susan relate her experience at Nikken, I was thinking, yeah, why couldn't I get that kind of gig down here? Again, I have no science background, or I know nothing about electricity, but that's not most of what I do. I've done websites, I've done, oh gosh, so much proofreadings and press releases, and just like the other day, speaking of science, I did something about batteries. You know, my output is between Sengo Hyaku and Nisen G per day if I concentrate. Like many of us, I use the online tools, you know, the dictionaries and stuff, but I don't just run it through Google Translate and try to clean it up. I think I'm old school that way. And unlike most of you, I never spent a day in a Japanese class. I studied Francais in high school and college. I learned Japanese in Japan. So I still have very much the imposter syndrome, but I do feel I can produce quality work. My question is, how do you get a full-time gig that will actually pay for your Hoken and your Nenkin? Because my company won't do this. My contract is only until October, and I'm wondering if I can support myself in this field. That's an open question to anyone, but especially to Susan, because she seems to have the experience of working in a large corporation.
Okay. Okay, let's see how to address that. When I got my full-time position, my boss was sitting across the room, a big, huge room with lots of desks, lots of people, and he's way over there, and I'm over in the corner here. And he sends me an email, and I sent him emails back, and we negotiated my contract that way, right over everybody's head. And in negotiating it, I argued that this is my annual income as a freelancer. And I fudged it, of course, a little bit, but I said, I make about this much as a freelancer, so I must be guaranteed at least that before I will be willing to work here full time. But he was asking me to work full time.
Okay.
So, and they offered me a little more than what I would have been making as a freelancer, and so I agreed to that. So I think you need to start by thinking how much you need. And the best advice I got back when I was a lot younger was to think in terms of your annual income. And also make sure when you talk to potential employers, you want to know your tedori, how much you're going to actually receive in cash after they've deducted this, that, and the other thing. And so make sure that you understand how much you'd actually be getting in cash, and also the benefits. Will they cover your health insurance and so on? So, but you have to be able to negotiate it. And I don't know, I'm not a business person. My approach was to make myself indispensable. They would throw all kinds of things at me, and I would do it, and I would talk to them about it and work on it until they were happy with the final result and stuff. So I made myself known. People knew of my presence. It was a big organization, but enough people felt I was useful that it made the bosses think, well, maybe she's handy to have around. So that was my approach. But also don't sell yourself too cheap ever. That was another good word of advice I got way back in the day, was start high. It's always easy to discount, but it's very hard to convince people to pay you more.
Yeah.
So don't accept low paying jobs that are too low paying. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really appreciated. Some of you, especially members of AFWJ, know that I've been through a lot in the past couple of years. I basically divorced my husband. We ran a school for 15 years, and I got nothing out of that, literally. So it's like starting from ground zero at age 50. And yeah, it's one of those things that keeps you up at night. But I've always wanted to be a translator. I know I could do it. I'm looking at this Fukuoka school right now, seeing if my company would invest in a course if they wanted me to interpret or translate. The main branch of this company has a lady who they hired instead of me to do interpreting and translating. Her level is N3 for Japanese, but she's a European with various European language skills. So, you know, it's not always about the quality of the work, unfortunately. It's about who is convenient to hire and who is the right age and, you know, who needs the working visa so they'll pay for the base of the lifestyle, right? With working visa, they have to pay a certain income to keep that worker.
That's right.
This is where my permanent residency actually works against me. So trying to do the details to, you know, make it my career. And if it doesn't work out here, you know, I can move. But I just wanted to give my company a chance to do right by me after a couple of years. You know, I deserve more than the minimum wage level they're paying me. Yeah, so.
Sheila, why does your permanent residence visa work against you though? I can't understand that.
Because the company doesn't have to hire me full-time, so they don't have to pay me the need you go on a month, which is mandated by the Japanese government to hire people full-time. That's the way I see it. Likewise, they don't have to pay the 50% share of my Hokkien or my Nankin because, you know, I already live here. With permanent residency, I could sit around and, you know, eat chocolate all day and the government doesn't care. So, you know, it's a matter of trying to make my career the career switch that I originally wanted when I got N1 back in 2002, but that's water under the bridge. It's been very educational to listen to all of this today. Thank you. So, yes.
Sorry, can I just ask you one more thing? You wrote in that comment, would you continue to work at 1,500 yen 3 days a week? What's the payment of 1,500 yen?
That's what I get. That's my salary. Okay, that's what I get. Yes, it's a little better than working at the kombini. I am paid 1,500 yen per hour to do.
Per hour.
Yes, to do the kind of work like I did on Thursday of last week, which is basically translating 16 to 1800 G in 7 hours about batteries. So, you know.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Okay, now I get it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. I don't see any hands up at the moment, so can I maybe suggest that we go back to Winnie? Unless I'm missing someone who wants to, oh, here's one. Sorry, excuse me, from Paul. Open question to the speakers. So Ubuse, Suzaka are not far, but also not so close to Tokyo. So do you think living where you are hinders or helps finding clients and work?
As the most recent person to move here, maybe I could start that. My clients are still in Tokyo after 30 odd years living in Tokyo, and they are willing to pay Tokyo prices. If you live, Hart and Brenda can talk more about that, but so I don't have any local clients right now working, living in Nagano. But it is possible to have clients in Tokyo and not have to bop into Tokyo for a lot of meetings, at least the kind of work I do. And I have clients I have never met, but we still exchange information, and I work for them and they pay me, and we're both happy with that arrangement. So I tend to gravitate to clients that don't demand a lot of face time. I prefer that. Yeah. Hart and Brenda, maybe they can add to that. Their experiences are different.
Yeah, I would say, again, like I said before, most of my work comes from people that I've already known or worked with, or who know someone who I've known or worked with. So it's mostly a word of mouth thing. I don't do a lot of face-to-face sales work, even if I was living in Tokyo, probably. But I do feel living in, and when I was doing a lot of Olympic work, or if I have to, Obase, Suzaka, it's close enough to be able to go down for a day trip to Tokyo very easily.
Yeah.
If you need to go down for a couple of days, you just stay in a hotel. It's location-wise, I think it's a very nice, Matsumoto might be a little easier, but it's a client face-to-face. And I've done that occasionally when I felt like I had a long-term client I wasn't getting a lot of work from recently, and I thought, wouldn't want them to forget about me. So I made an appointment and went down and sat with them for a couple hours at their office. And then, a month or so later, I started getting work picked up again. I would say living here, I think sweat events, JAD events, other kinds of events, I miss a lot. I really wish I had the much greater availability of those face-to-face meetings that are so often held, or the ability to just, to do more face-to-face stuff. But, the advantages of living in this area for me outweigh the disadvantages. And I'm not making tons and tons of money, but I'm also not spending tons and tons of money on my living expenses. So for me, I don't think it's a handicap. And if I need to meet someone face-to-face, it's easy enough to do.
Yeah, there's not much I can add to that, except when I first moved to Nagano, obviously I didn't know how to really go about it, but I had my connections at USJ, and so luckily I've maintained those, and I still work at USJ at least a couple times a year. I'm lucky enough to have other, again, word of mouth. So friends who are interpreters and translators in Tokyo who recommend me, and the one woman I mentioned before who, we basically work exclusively together. And when she has a client who wants their interpreter translator in Tokyo, she just says, she's in Nagano, and it takes less time for her to get to Tokyo than it would someone in the suburbs of Tokyo. So, and she does I guess the negotiating on my behalf. So yeah, I don't find it to be that much of a disadvantage living here.
One thing I might add is if there's any disadvantage in terms of like local clients, it's that I think there's a tendency, if someone local wants to hire me, it doesn't start off as a professional negotiation. It's kind of like, hey, could you do this as a favor? And it's very difficult to negotiate those unless you decide to just do it as a volunteer job at a rate or at a it's hard to shift a friendship, to shift a local, someone or someone who's in your circle to a business relationship. That's difficult. And I think there's a tendency also when you, not just in translation, but in any field, if you're asking someone local, you're assuming someone coming from, you're willing to pay 3 times as much for an expert from the outside than someone who has more.
What you just said. Can I ask?
Yeah.
Sorry, Hart.
Oh,
can I ask you to go back to that last statement?
If there's any disadvantage of local, it is probably that there's 2 things. One is that friends will ask you to do things, and it can be tricky to kind of turn a friendship or someone who's in your circle, turn that into a professional relationship, because there's strings are attached. Because they're in their parents, they have children in your kids' classes or something. I mean, there's all kinds of things that make things sticky. But the other thing is, I think in general, people in the provinces, so to speak, if you look at like what the local yakuba is willing to do, they are much more willing to hire someone from the outside at consultant rates, a high-priced outside consultant, than they are necessarily to hire someone with expertise who's local. It's just psychologically, if you're hiring someone local, you assume they don't really know that much. I mean, they might be your local plumber or your local carpenter, but you don't assume they're expert carpenters. They're just the local guys. If you really want something done well, you're going to hire some famous person from the outside.
Yeah.
So not that I lose any work by that, but I'm saying it's something that I sense. People are very happy to throw money after the promise of an outside expert, where they might not be willing to provide the same resources for someone who's as or more talented, who's local, just because you tend to see your neighbors as maybe not so. I mean, I sense that.
The other thing about local work is that I think you run into the, what I run into quite often is that companies, there are a lot of factories in Nagano, and they'll have a native person on staff who likes to rework my translation, and they will not budge. So my clients in Tokyo, usually they will trust what I have to say. If I say, sorry, your native speaker is not actually a native speaker and I am, they will relinquish their control to me. But I find that in Nagano, people are much less willing to believe that I actually know more about the English language than their native speaker who spent 5 years in the States. I find that quite often.
Let me direct us to Emily's question here, and then Richard. I see Richard's got a hand up. We'll go to you next, but since this is very much on the topic, so and Brenda, you're just getting, I think, hitting at a little bit of this. So would you say that outside of Tokyo, people are less aware of what to expect in the business of translation in terms of price or workflow, etc.? So any of the three of you?
I definitely feel that the prices are lower here, yeah. But that's across the board, not just translation in general, but I think it's different from a huge urban area like Tokyo or Osaka. So if you come here and expect to get paid by a local client, the same kind of prices you're paid by a Tokyo client, you're going to be very disappointed. So it has to be, you have to be attracted by the nature of the work or the people you work with or the environment or something else. But right now, I've been here 2 years. It seems quite possible if you already have created a base someplace else to work remotely in an environment that you enjoy without giving up your metropolitan clients so far. Knock on wood. Yeah.
There are also a lot of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brenda.
There are also a lot of U-turners or I-turners who have relocated to Nagano. So I have a lot of friends who are like in the graphic design business or videography business who I work with. They come to me to do their English translations or their subtitling and stuff like that. So they are aware of what Tokyo prices are, and their clients are usually based out of Nagano, or even if they're based in Nagano, they're willing to pay what I ask. So it's not all Nagano prices are necessarily lower than metropolitan prices, but it depends on who you're working with, really, I think.
Yeah, I'll just second what Brenda said. I think fields like graphic design or web design, people that are involved in those fields, it's not a local business. There are I don't know if there's industry standards, but I mean, people are used to working with people all over the country, and I think have a good sense of what the market range is. So if you've got someone in the graphic design field who's experienced and knows what they're doing and has worked on projects in-house at various places, if they contact Brenda and make an offer for a translation or for subtitling, they probably already have some idea what a reasonable rate is, unless you come back with something outrageous. In fact, lowballing a job like that might make you look like you don't know what you're doing. So, you know, I think that if there's to the original question, if there's aren't experienced, they never hired a translator before. And
Hart, we lost you for about 10
I'm
seconds.
sorry. So to the original question, I think if there's an issue with people in provinces, it's more that it's less with people like Brenda was talking about, who have experience in their field and are accustomed to the national, say, range, the national range, and more it's people who are local who've never hired a translator before. They just don't know. You know, hey, could you translate this? Would you translate my web page? Well, your web page is full of all kinds of information that you don't need translated. No one's going to read it. No one cares. So, you know, what they really need is a consultant to help them figure out, okay, of these tens of thousands of words that you're putting up on your blog as the local miso producer, how much of that really needs to be put in English? Who are you really trying to reach? Do you need a translation? Do you need a rewriting? It's a different conversation, really, more of an education, I think, than just a rates issue. I think a lot of people, they'll meet someone like Brenda and let's say, oh, hey, this is a possibility. I'll just ask Brenda to do it. Whereas they might never have thought otherwise to even attempt to do an English version. But I mean, educating new clients is something that we all deal with, right? But I mean, I think that's maybe pronounced in an area like we live in.
Great, thank you. All right, Richard Sadowski has been waiting patiently to ask a question, and then after that, we'll go to Louise. Okay, Richard.
Thanks. For Susan, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I think it was, when you made your transition from out of Tokyo to Nagano, I recall that you were a little bit unsure of moving from full-time work into the freelance lifestyle. So how did that transition go for you, and how comfortable are you now?
Okay, it's been 2 years, more than 2 years now since I moved here. And I had planned to move for a year or two before that. I was thinking about moving away. So even as I still had my job, my full-time job, I took on freelance work to get myself back into the mode and to let people know I would like to do freelance work. And I only have a handful of clients. I still only have a handful of clients, but my priorities are slightly different now that I'm a lot older and freer and on my own. So I don't need to make a lot of money. I'm not starting my career. I'm really trying to wind it down. But I also am pragmatic and realize I cannot live on Nanking alone. It's just not possible. So, but I am getting Nanking, which is nice. It helps, but it's not enough. And so the main thing I did was prepare at least a year ahead of time by picking up freelance work, even as I'm doing full-time work. And so that meant a lot of late nights, and it's a little hard, but going in cold was too scary for me. So I did that, and things managed to work out, and I managed to carry over some big jobs that I knew would carry me over for several months. So I was lucky. And now with the corona, my big jobs have finally ended, and I'm back to just my piecemeal clients, and I don't know what the future holds. But like I said, I'm older, and I'm just not going to fret about it. I'll take it as it comes, right?
Thank you.
So that's my big advice, is to start preparing at least a year ahead of time. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks. Okay, Louise, you're up.
Hello. I apologize. I've got two questions, one for Brenda and one for Hart. For Brenda, I wanted to ask, what do you do for USJ? I'm kind of trying to imagine, but I can't. Is it mostly translation or interpretation, and for who?
Actually, so when I was working at USJ, a lot of my job was to interpret for directors and choreographers who had come over from America or Europe, and were teaching cast, Japanese cast, the scripts or the shows. And it's actually a lot more complicated than it seems, because you really have to get the intention across. And it was a lot of fun. I really, really missed doing that. It was probably my favorite type of work. But and I was translating scripts and basically show pitches for the upper management and stuff like that. Now what I do is actually, I do some translation here and there when they don't have someone, when one of their on-staff in-house translators is busy or in-house interpreters is busy. Now what I do though, mostly is I teach new cast coming in their Japanese scripts. So I work with the cast. If you've ever been to Universal Studios and you're familiar with the world of Harry Potter there, they have a wand shop. And the wand shop, the wand keepers are all foreigners. They're all native English speakers, or mostly native English speakers. No Japanese. Most of them have no Japanese experience. And so I teach them how to deliver their scripts in Japanese with a more Japanese sounding accent than what would it sound like if they're trying to make mishmash out of the romaji that they receive. And I also now at Waterworld, the Waterworld show as well. There's the Helen, the one female role in the show is done live. So I teach her script, and then I'm actually involved in a lot of the direction of the show now, which is really exciting. So I teach, before the show goes up, when they get a new Helen in the role, I go to Universal Studios and help prepare her for her debut. And work with them, the cast, from time to time throughout the year via Skype or Zoom or
Oh, thank you. That's
a lot of fun.
Exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's one of my favorite jobs.
Great. May I move on to my other question?
I'm done.
Okay. All right. My other question's for Hart, and that is, I know him as a literary translator, but he's talked more about commercial, but he's also talked a little bit about his literary translation. And Hart, I want to know, what percentage of your time do you spend on commercial translation versus literary translation?
Hi, Louise, thanks. Boy, I don't know. I mean, it's sort of the old 80-20 rule. I mean, I probably most of my time is commercial, but a lot of the work I do is also not really one or the other. There's a photography school in Tokyo that hires me to do, I don't know, a couple times a year. They'll hire me to do the criticism, the critical essay that accompanies the photos. Well, is that commercial or is it literary? I mean, usually these are art critics trying to make an awful lot out of sometimes very little. So it's definitely creative writing. But it's not fiction. So a lot of the stuff I do sort of falls in the gap, I would say, between literary and commercial. Strictly literary things, I don't do a lot, partly because I'm not terribly aggressive. I still don't quite understand the whole, how do you sell what you've translated? How do you work with publishers? How do you work with this or that?
It's a mystery to us all.
Published that I was truly literary. I mean, there's the book, Radio Nation, Sozo Daggio, which I know you and Alice and others are familiar with. An excerpt from that got published in a literary magazine in the US. But that didn't come to me through a publisher. That came to me through just a translation agency who I've done commercial things for. And sort of hell out of nowhere, they asked me to do this, and I said, okay. And that still hasn't been shepherded after years into a publication. I mean, just the excerpt. And then a couple of the children's books, those are from a local publisher. The Chelsea Buns, the Nurse and Obase book, that's a local publisher. Just this last year, he had me do another bilingual title about a grandfather and a wood stove, which was kind of fun because I have a wood stove, so I understood kind of what the story was about. But those generally, none of that makes me much money or consumes a whole lot of my time, except when I have a project like that. It's absolutely numbing. I mean, it's all consuming. So I don't have a good balance between commercial and literary. I wish I had more literary things ongoing, and I could say I had a whole bunch of projects, sort of on the back burner. I've been asked to translate some things that I just, I'd love to do it, but it's a novel length thing, and there's no promise of any kind of a payout, and I have to keep doing the commercial stuff to keep the bills paid. So I've missed opportunities that might have been really fun because there's no guarantee it's going to get paid anything. So doesn't really answer your question, but I'd say probably 80-20, maybe 90-10 on the favor of most of my time is commercial.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that was interesting. Thank you. Oh, Lisa.
Yes, so sorry, I was muted, I forgot. So we're coming up on the 12 o'clock hour, but let's maybe just stay on this literary topic just for the last moment, because Emma's got a question going. She's put up in chat, and have been a lot of chat responses, but she's asking about how to move into literary translation from general translation. So let's let this question maybe play a little bit, and then we'll formally end the meeting officially, but we can stay on as long as you like. So would anyone like to, I think that there are also, besides our three speakers, there are other literary translators here in the group, if anyone wants to jump in on this, more than what's been going on here in the chat, or yeah, I'll let you guys take it from there.
I'll just say one more thing, which is that, again, every you have, and I'm sure others can speak more aggressively pursuing how to pursue literary projects. In my case, it's mostly been when an interesting literary project has sort of fallen into my target zone, grab it, take the chance, and those have been fun. But I think there's others on the chat who probably have much more experience. I mean, Louise and Allison, of course, and others who have much more experience moving projects forward and having success in that area.
Anyone else with a comment on how to get into literary translation?
Emily wrote something in the chat box, which I would agree with. Try and do a short story. I think Avery mentioned it too.
Yeah.
Try write a short story, a short piece, and try and get that accepted somewhere. That's like a good starting point to get a foot in the door. Once you have something online, then publishers can see that and can see what you do, and yeah, it becomes like a testimony for the next stage, whatever that is.
So let's formally end the meeting, but continue to stay on here.
Thank you for sharing so much time and a thoughtful commentary with us. I learned a lot, and I have lots more questions running through my head for everybody. So I hope we will get to, interact again in a future event, or once this formal session wraps up. Everyone feel free to stick around and chat. But I had a good time. I hope everyone else did as well. So thank you.